Welcome, friends. Today we have a very special guest with us in the carpenter shop to have a Cuppa Joe, none other than Mike Lewis of WPI, also known as Where Peter Is. Now, as we like to do with all of our guests, Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you like your coffee. Have you ever given the Pope a high five? And since your last name is Lewis, are we related?
Well, let's start with the easy question, which would be, are we related? Of course we are. We have the same last name. There aren't many people with the last name Lewis out there. I mean, come on. I'm sure we're, probably second cousins. So I'm going with that. I think we're related. In terms of what kind of coffee I like, we'll go in order of difficulty. I used to be Mr. Hardcore. I like it black. I'm a tough guy, but you know what? I don't have coffee every day anymore. I'm not as, and when I do, I kind of get cheap. I kind of get lazy. You put a little bit of whole milk in there, some sweetener, some sugar in there. It goes down easier. I'm a wimp like that. I still use ketchup. I'm not one of those guys who, wants to tough it out.
Well, Mike, I think we might be related then, not just because you're a handsome guy like me, and you got that big nose, maybe the Lewis nose.
Oh yeah, but it's a strong nose.
Yeah, strong Lewis nose. But since you like your coffee just like I like mine, you remember in that maybe not so PG movie Airplane years ago, where they asked the little girl, "How do you like your coffee?" And she said, "Black and strong, just like my men." And so when people ask me, how do I like my coffee? I say, sweet and tan, just like my wife. So it sounds like we both like our coffee sweet and tan. I tend to think that Joseph, the manly Joseph in the carpenter shop, which here we are. And I think it's so funny that your shirt is green. It reminds me to look at this little green dot on my computer because that's where everyone's at, right? But you got the perfect shirt today because, St. Joseph's color is green. But I'm also thinking how cool it is that, whether we're related or not, we have another commonality, which is you're running Where Peter Is, and you have a son named Peter. And here I am with a Cuppa Joe, and I have a son named Joseph. So how cool is that?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I think when a saint actually plays a role in your life to that degree, I think that's cool. As some people, it's like I love Saint Peter. I love Saint Joseph too, but you have a devotion to Saint Joseph, and it's like, you know what? Let's name this kid after that saint, and got my wife to go along with it. It was a second son. Our second son is Peter.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So
well, our fourth son is named Joseph. We figured that was appropriate since he was born in Egypt. And he was born not long after we did a novena to St. Joseph, because I lost my job in the US. And, be careful what you pray for. St. Joseph will always get the job done, but sometimes he'll take you to places like Egypt. So
yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, to go into my, so who I am. So basically I'm a cradle Catholic. I'm a lifelong Marylander, except for that 1 year in Philadelphia that I don't necessarily like to talk about. Where in the U.S. are you from originally? I don't know.
I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, and I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. So
okay.
And a quick question.
And you've been a world traveler ever since, I guess, or
yeah. I work as a private business jet pilot. So, I'm one of those really lucky, blessed guys where I get to do what I love. And basically I get paid to travel the world to check out new churches and basilicas. So
awesome.
So it's so cool. Which actually, I got to go to mass here in about an hour with the other captain. So, and this one's in English, so I'm excited. So having mass in English isn't always, that's a luxury depending on where I'm at. But
oh yeah, absolutely.
Hey Mike, real quick, do you have a green dot on your laptop?
No, I have a
there you go.
I have a camera that's up there.
Yeah, look at the camera. So like
Okay.
when you're talking, if you could, that way it looks like you're looking at me or the people, because otherwise you're looking down, I think, at maybe our pictures. So there we
Yeah,
go.
probably. All
Cool,
right.
cool.
I'll do my best to look up. So yeah, to answer your question though about what I, so what I do, I went to the University of Maryland. I studied English, language and literature, kind of went into the writing and publishing field. Grew up in a very Catholic family. My little brother is a priest in the Archdiocese of Washington. So, he took one for the team. And
Awesome.
I'm married with 4 kids. And then, in 2010, I started working for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Worked in the publishing department. Really kind of went in there, took a huge pay cut because I felt a call to help the church in the area of communications, to help deliver the message of the church, to help inform people about the church and what the church teaches. That I was there for 7 years, which I think encompassed the election of Pope Francis, the resignation of Pope Benedict, and everything. And then out of the blue, I lost my job. I got laid off. My department restructured, laid off 11 people. Unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago, they laid off most of the rest of that department. But when I was let go from the job, I people were like, "Oh man, you're working for the church is so awful," and it is in a lot of ways. I'm not gonna lie, but it was sort of like I felt like there was a lot of unfinished business that I wanted to attend to. Like I really felt like there were things that I would have liked to have done while I was there, but it was really the bureaucracy and the way everything worked. I couldn't, it just didn't happen. Like I felt like there was work was incomplete. Around that time, and so I grew up in a basic, conservative, devout Catholic environment. Big fan of JP. We were the JP2 generation. We were Ratzinger Catholics. We were kind of in the sort of young family crowd at church. With a bunch of kids running around. And I started to notice after Pope Francis got elected that a lot of my Catholic friends were starting to doubt him or question him or criticize him, and a lot of the Catholic outlets I was reading were had turned on him basically, and I when I would read what he would say, I would see like there's something they're either misinterpreting him or they're reading him with bad will, or they just need a little bit of a better explanation. And a group of us who all met online, like I met you on Facebook. I met Pedro Gabriel, Paul Fahey, and Brian Killian online. And we kind of had like this little group chat going on about, oh, this happened in the news, or what do you think this meant, or what do you think he meant by this, talking about the Pope, or talking about what was going on in the church. And after a little while, and this is like 4 or 5 months after I lost my job, they were 2 of them individually approached me and said, maybe we should start like a group blog or something like that, and just some of the things that we've been just sending to each other. Like someone might write like an 8-paragraph, like, oh, I think that's what the Pope meant this weekend, or was this, and or try to explain this papal document, or if somebody like gave a negative editorial, they'd write like a response to it and explain what the Pope really meant, or what the guy had misinterpreted. And so it was like, yeah, sure, let's start it. So they kind of made me the the editor-in-chief by default, and I guess I was the one without the job. So that that's just sort of how that happened. And
Providential.
so then some 4 years later, we've had over 100 different contributors, including bishops, including world-renowned theologians, including writers. We started a podcast. We started it's at first it started just sort of like defending Pope Francis against his critics, but we wanted to expand more into, let's reflect on the scriptures. Let's talk about Catholic moral issues. Let's talk about Catholic family life. Let's talk about, a lot of people have like spilled their guts about, really deep spiritual, really profound spiritual things that they underwent. And I mean, I've been blessed to work with a great group of writers. We've gotten recognition from, places that I wouldn't expect. And it was just, it just started as a little WordPress blog with 4 guys. And then, we could talk a little bit more about that, but to answer your
Mike,
question.
who are the
yeah.
four guys?
So,
I've heard of Five Guys hamburger joint. So
yeah.
4 guys. Who are
me,
your 4 founding fathers?
4 founding fathers are Mike Lewis, Pedro Gabriel, he's an oncologist in Portugal. Wow. Who speaks fluent English, speaks and writes fluent English, and for whatever reason, we kind of we met each other on Facebook, and actually I introduced him to his wife, who lived in the Philippines, through sort of this connection, and now they're married and they're living in Portugal, and they've been married for a couple of years. Brian Killian is the name of the other guy, and he's sort of our he's been kind of our IT website guy, in addition to writing a few pieces here and there, but he's more busy, I think, than they have. But yeah, we have a production editor, Rachel Amiri, has helped take the reins, helped get me organized and running the site. And her husband, Dan Amiri, was probably number 6 when it came to, when we went from 4 to 6 contributors. Now we've lost count, but then his wife started contributing, and we have a young guy named Malcolm Schlunderfritz, who is based out of Colorado, and he's an interesting guy. He grew up in a traditionalist, like a radical traditionalist community, but then 4 or 5 years ago, his family sort of started to see through some of the cracks of the ideology, and now he's a big fan of the Pope, and a big fan of just the church as we know it. Okay, and he's also got this whole What's that?
So the 4 guys were Michael, which is a powerful archangel name, like kick the butt of Satan. You got Pedro, which means Peter, right? And he's like helping to fight the cancer that's like out there against Pope Francis, right? So he's an oncologist fighting cancer. So if I can try to wax
Paul, we've got a Paul to go with Peter, Paul, and then Brian, I don't know, Irish.
Perfect. and Malcolm.
His last name is Killian. Yeah. Malcolm. Now that's Malcolm Schlunderfritz. I think that's that's a unique.
Malcolm's a powerful name. Well, that's awesome. So where Peter is started 4 years ago, you said?
Yeah, it was like February 1st, 2018. So yeah.
And before we get too much further, if friends want to go check out your website, your podcast, what's the best link they can go to make it easy for them?
So wherepeteris.com is the best link, just one word. Yeah.
I'll link it below.
It'll be below. Go look down there. Sorry, I'm getting myself cut off over there. Down. Wherepeteris.com. And so basically we publish something pretty much every day, one or two articles. We've got a variety of different kinds of posts. We do go from like the wonky apologetics type stuff to more historical stuff. One of the things that we started to get into, I think 2018 or late 2018, early 2019, was kind of digging into some of the conspiracy theories and stuff like that a lot of Pope Francis's critics have bought into, or fake apparitions or unapproved apparitions, I guess I'd say. We've sort of discovered that a lot of the reactionary traditionalists had bought into kind of a QAnon ideology. So one of our writers, David Lafferty, did a PhD in like reactionary movements in Europe in the early 20th century, and it's just he sort of like latches on to I had never even heard of QAnon, and he's like reading Archbishop Vigano's letter and saying he's using QAnon terminology. So that's so and it's funny because you never know what's going to be posted the next day, because it's not like people like say, how come you haven't covered this, or how come you haven't covered that? And I'm like, buddy, we run, like, if it's like not heretical and it's readable and we have and it's ready to post, and it's vaguely on topic, it's we publish it. But God has kept us going, or thanks be to God, we've been able to keep going for 4 years.
Well,
So,
Mike, I think it's so funny in a providential way when we look back, on our life, like how things go. Sometimes the bad things, like you lost your job, I lost my job. But in hindsight, it's like the best thing that ever happened to me, because I probably would have never taken that job in Egypt. Likewise for you, if you hadn't lost your job, maybe you would never start this awesome apostolate where Peter is. And probably like many people out there that are watching today, who have also already discovered your apostolate, or especially for those who have not yet. My story was I discovered WPI maybe 2 years ago. And probably like most people, I had a friend who was like really dogging the Pope, saying, oh, Pope Francis, he doesn't believe in hell and this and that. I'm like, what? Of course he believes in hell. Like, no. So then I Google it and I found out, you have to kind of wade through all this stuff and find out that, oh, he was talking to some, atheist reporter guy who sometimes bends the truth. And then you compare it to like something he wrote officially. And of course he, believes in hell. But anyway, through that research, I thankfully stumbled upon WPI. And I can't remember if I found your website first or your Facebook page. But anyway, it was just such a treasure chest. Like, yes, finally, some group out there is like defending the Pope. And okay, this is what he really said. I kind of think of WPI as what's the those groups that debunk like the
like Snopes or something
like
like
Snopes.
that.
Yeah. So for me, WPI is kind of like the Catholic Snopes for the Pope. Like, what did the Pope really say? So if you guys, need a good resource to see, just get the facts, decide for yourself type of stuff, WPI is your perfect solution. So
and I mean, I think one of the things, and I just want to say from our editorial angle, like a lot of times people will think that we're, trying to, like, we don't try to twist what the Pope's saying, like, and sometimes, individual contributors might be like, I don't know how to respond to this issue, or I don't know. But it's like, if we can decipher what the Pope is trying to say, if there is a response, we'll publish it. Like, there's been a lot of criticism because, Pope Francis has been, it's funny because, pro-Russian people will argue that the Pope is, being against Russia, but pro-Ukraine people are acting like he's not defending Ukraine enough. And really, I mean, what it comes down to is even if a war is totally lopsided in who's right and who's wrong, the Pope's job is to call for peace, right? He's not going to say, nuke Russia. Like, he's not going to come out and say that. So we actually, Austin Ivory, who wrote a famous biography about Pope Francis, and also has written a book with Pope Francis more recently, he wrote a quick response to some of these people who were saying that he wasn't doing enough to defend Ukraine. And it's like, obviously his position is clear, but he's not going to do this and this and this. And obviously he's still going to try to speak to the Russian Orthodox Patriarch. Obviously he's still going to, and it's like, so we publish it. And then we started getting letters from people saying, you don't have to defend the Pope on every single little thing. And it's like, you're right. Like, individuals don't have to do that. But our service to you is to provide you with the Pope's, with what, at least to the best we can determine. And I think the Pope's biographer is a pretty good person to talk to about that. What do we think the Pope is trying to do here? And if you don't like what the Pope's trying to do here, then, fine, you can reject it. But, we're trying to be as faithful to his message as we can. And that's not to say he hasn't challenged us. It isn't to say there aren't areas where he is rightfully criticized. But I think on the whole, I think his vision and his message for the church is very positive. So anyway.
Well, Mike, that dovetails nicely in my second question, which you already told us about some of the history of WPI. And earlier this year, Pope Francis spoke about Saint Joseph and his 4 dreams. So yourself, as the founder of Where Peter Is, what would be your dreams? What would be your dream come true for WPI looking into the future?
What you mentioned one of his Wednesday audiences, which reminds me of the last part of your other question that I didn't answer. Have I given the Pope a high five? And the answer is no. But in April, at the April 6th audience, my family and I had the opportunity to have, at the end of the audience, he goes around and greets, people, and we got into that section. And so we each got a little handshake and, some pictures and, a little brief, hi, how are you? He doesn't speak much English and I don't speak much of anything else. So my little daughter, Lucy, said, adios, and he chuckled and he said adios and he patted her on the cheek and then he left. It was
Cute.
like, well, that was, and we did say hello and introduced, and he shook everyone's hand. It was it was a nice little interaration.
Oh, nice. Okay, so it wasn't a high five or a fist bump.
It's a handshake,
but it was just a more traditional handshake, which is supposed to be more.
And next time I'm in the Cuppa Joe cafe, I will tell you the story of the time I touched Pope Benedict's hand. So
wow. So you got 2 popes.
It wasn't actually a handshake. I got in on a handshake that was already, he skipped my hand and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. So he got 2 people shaking his hand on the on the other side. So yeah, okay. My four dreams for Where Peter Is. The first dream I would say is that we continue our growth, if it's God's will. We keep providing a unique voice in the church. Whatever, whoever is being underrepresented, wherever there's a faithful voice that's not being lifted up, that we continue to do that. The second one is that we remain faithful to the church's teachings and to the Pope, whoever he is. That was one of the things people are like, I mean, he's 85 now. When we started it, he was 81, and they're like, he's not going to be Pope forever, and it's like, well, it's basically all we're doing is we're applying the same view of the current Pope that we had for the previous popes. It's treating him like he is the Pope. And so I don't foresee that changing no matter who the Pope is. I will tell you this, unlike some Catholic media outlets, I wouldn't, if it became like, I God forbid this, I pray this day never happens, but if I ever felt that I could not defend the Pope, I would not turn Where Peter Is into a Pope bashing site. I'd turn it over to someone else. I'd shut it down. It's like, if you go, as long as Where Peter Is exists, it will stand with the Pope. That's my personal guarantee to the best of my ability and know-how.
Well,
number 3,
as you're talking, a thought keeps coming back to my mind on, I'm sure you're familiar with the Knights of Columbus, a big group there in the US. They've been kind of described before in literature as the Pope's, right arm, because they help to fund, I think the annual Christmas papal mass and stuff like that. And they do a lot of good stuff for the church.
Oh yeah.
So with that in mind, I kind of see WPI maybe as the strong left arm of the Pope, helping to, defend the Pope, as you eloquently said, whoever he might be. So that's awesome. And as one who's, got to shake the hands of the previous Pope, Pope Benedict XVI, and the current Pope, Pope Francis, my next question, Mike, is, would you agree that Pope Francis is the greatest Pope of St. Joseph in history? Why or why not?
So, and this is, I'm going to plug John Lewis here, because John has written for Where Peter Is before, and it was a piece called The Greatest Pope of St. Joseph. And I think that was the title. And it's funny because the style was probably a little bit more rambunctious than most of our pieces, but just, like I said, there's a variety there. It was a boxing match basically, or King of the Mountain, or one of those kinds of things. And so he worked his way through the early popes. Not much to say there. Who is the greatest Pope? And so then it's like, this Pope mentioned Saint Joseph one time, this Pope consecrated such and such Saint Joseph. And then you started really getting going by like probably Pius the 10th or 12th, maybe.
Okay.
And then John the 23rd, the ball really got rolling. And I'm going to say he awarded it to Pope Francis, but I think it's on a technicality because, first of all, Pope Benedict XVI, whose first name is Joseph, he is the one who got the ball rolling to add Saint Joseph to Eucharistic prayers 2, 3, and 4. And so that was already in the works when he resigned and when Pope Francis got elected. And like if you notice for the listeners, when during the Eucharistic prayer, when Eucharistic prayer 1, 2, 3, in Eucharistic prayer 1, the priest will say, Mary, his ever Virgin Mother, and then Joseph, her spouse. And that Joseph, her spouse, was not in 2 through 4 until till Francis officially added it. But it was Benedict's idea. So I'll still give Francis the win, but it's like a TKO. It's not a.
Okay, so Francis wins by TKO. So it sounds like you have a big affinity there for Pope Benedict XVI, maybe as the second greatest pope. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, there's no question. There's no question.
No question.
His name is Joseph. I mean, there's just it's just natural. It's just like Pope Francis, his real name, or his name is Jorge George. And it's like they didn't celebrate the feast of St. George every year in the Vatican until Pope Francis showed up, and George is my confirmation saint. And even though we don't have many biological details about what St. George did, my theory is maybe like yours is with St. Joseph, because we don't know so much, but he gets so much attention and devotion, means that whatever he did, it must have been extraordinary.
Exactly.
I don't know. That's just my theory. If the graces are that strong, then, and we don't know why, there must be a supernatural reason for it.
Well, yeah, just ask anybody from England, right? They got St. George Day.
Right.
One of our sons is named Jorge.
Oh, wow.
And I took a picture the other day where I'm at currently. I passed by a place called St. George and the Dragon. And it shows, it's a pub, like an English pub. And it shows St. George, kicking a dragon's butt. So I think all of us are called to be a St. George in a way to slay the dragons in our life. And of course, the number one dragon slayer, I got to go with St. Joseph. So with that in mind, speaking of, Pope Peter, let's go back in our DeLorean to the very first Pope. So Pope Peter, since you are the founder of Where Peter Is, I can't help asking you this little tricky theological biblical question. Maybe, do you think Peter, the first pope, ever met Joseph? I don't know, maybe like over in Capernaum on a wooden boat repair job. What's your speculation?
So actually you sent me this question a while ago, and I started to think about it a little bit. And now this is not theological, but I don't think it breaks any. I think this is an area where imagination is more than is more than acceptable. So in my reflecting back on my own life, my dad passed away when I was in my 30s, and I think and like I was never able to get to share my youngest daughter, my the work with Where Peter Is, a lot of the things that I've been doing in my life with him, but I have brought him with me spiritually, and the memory. And when I'm with my friends or when I'm with other family members, we talk about him a lot and remember the good that he did. So I kind of see that Peter got to know Joseph in that way through Jesus. That I imagine, and most people, I guess, think that Joseph passed away before Jesus started his public ministry.
Yep.
When Jesus called Peter, there's no impression that Peter and Andrew knew him, really knew who he was until a little bit before that. So I'm gonna say that they did not meet in person, but I think that to a large extent, those stories and those memories, and definitely those intercessory prayers of Saint Joseph, did influence Saint Peter.
Well, that's a perfect way to put it that I never thought of before. And like you and probably 99.8% of the rest of the world probably would think, of course, he never met Pete, whose name wasn't even Peter yet. It was Simon back then.
Yeah.
So the more precise question should have been, John, did Joseph ever meet little Simon?
Now little Simon. Yeah, that's a good question too. But I'm going to go with the no. I'm going to go with the Capernaum versus Egypt and all that other,
and you very well may be right. And I'll let the friends post down.
But go ahead with your theory. Below.
So here's my theory. I was reading this little chapter called John chapter 6. Oh, by the way, that's the Chinese way to say 6, not hang loose, So John chapter 6, which every Catholic, of course, knows by heart. So that's when Jesus is giving the bread of life discourse. This is my body, this is my flesh. Won't go into that. That's a whole nother subject. But at the end of that bread of life discourse, which was where? Capernaum, in the synagogue in Capernaum. And guess what? In John's gospel, someone pipes up and says, isn't this the son of Mary and Joseph, who we knew?
Oh, yeah.
So light bulb, as I was working on my book Journey with Joseph, I was like, wait a minute, put the pieces.
So you're thinking together. They may have known him.
That means the people in Capernaum knew Joseph, because they said, isn't this the son of Joseph? Like, wait a minute, how did they know Joseph? He already died like a few years ago. So that tells me, my little pea brain, oh, maybe Joseph walked over to Capernaum like Jesus did often. And why would he go over there? Well, he works on wood and he's a carpenter. Oh, maybe he fixed some boats. Boats are made of wood back then. Maybe he fixed some boats. Now, then if you think about how the fact that Simon, and his brother, what's his brother's name?
Andrew.
So Andrew and Simon lived where? In Capernaum, and also Bethsaida, which is not too far away. So they had 2 houses. They had one house over in Capernaum because their dad, Jonah, he ran like a fishing business, right? And also they had the friend Zebedee and his son. So those guys were kind of already in this fishing business. So at this time, Jesus would have been young if Joseph took him on a road trip, for a work job. And Peter would have been young too. So yeah, they would have been like, kids. Like I picture maybe like, a 12-year-old, Jesus going over there on a work project with dad, Joseph, his, non-biological father, but father in every other way, go over there with Joseph. And then maybe Simon is out there, playing around with Jonah, and he's teaching his son Simon to fish. Just a theory, because how else would they have known Joseph? It's just speculation, but
yeah,
it makes
sense. So that's in your book. I need to get your book.
No, it's not in my book.
It's not in your book
later. No, that's not my
book. The next book. Next book.
Okay, well, cool.
I want to do that. I want to write a book. I haven't done that yet. I have a couple of ideas. I just need to get life organized first. But anyway.
So
go ahead.
Mike, next question. What has been WPI's most popular article and or podcast so far, and why do you think that is?
So, this is the interesting thing. When I just looked at our all-time numbers, and the article that got the highest numbers was, I think, late last year. There was a viral video of a brawl in the sanctuary during Mass in a Catholic church. And the thing is, like, people weren't sure what it was. They thought maybe it was like, the guy didn't have a mask on and the priest did, and they thought maybe it was like a COVID thing, or, and so this video is popping up all over, Twitter and Facebook, and people are making these assertions or guesses about what's going on. And a reader actually called me and asked me, or told me that, they knew this priest, and the situation was all like, it was being misreported everywhere. And what it really was that this priest had filed a, like a restraining order against this person who had been harassing them for months. And so then this person shows up at Mass, and the priest, tells him, get lost, you're trespassing, and the guy decided to get up on the altar. Well, anyway, I did basically, I mean, I don't consider myself a journalist, but like I've said in the past, like I've been known to commit journalism every once in a while. So, so what I did was I went to the, I knew the location. It was in the Seattle area. I looked at, basically looked in, it was after hours, but like I went to their court website and I found court documents and restraining orders, and basically was able to uncover facts that said what happened. And so I published this, and the traffic was insane over that. And I think the lesson from that is that, and it's kind of unfortunate, is that controversy and sensationalism sell, because we publish some some reflections and some theological work that I just, sometimes I'm blown away by it. Like I'm amazed at what some of our writers have put together. Our second biggest article was when the McCarrick report came out. And I've mentioned Austin Ivory a few times, but he's really been one of our biggest, supporters. My sleep schedule can hop all over the place. I happen to wake up at 3 a.m. one morning. He's English, so he's, it's normal time for him. And I see I have a text from him, and he's gotten his hands on the McCarrick report, and it's going to drop at noon in Rome. So like 6 a.m. on the East Coast here. And would I like to publish his response to it? So here I have the Pope's biographer's authoritative response to this McCarrick report that we've been talking about for years and years and years. And I said, sure, and I wound up staying up and running through it, edits with him, and getting it up, right 2 minutes after the embargo ended. So that was a great opportunity. But then in other cases, it's usually like, Archbishop Vigano said something crazy, or, Cardinal Burke got into a fight with so-and-so. And it's like people associate us with just those pieces, when really that's only maybe 20% of what we do. Like the other 80% is, Catholic writing, spiritual writing, scripture reflection, or just sort of expounding on some area of Catholic teaching. But anyway, so it's like, if you don't like the polemical stuff, there's something for you there. If you do like the polemical stuff, then we've got you covered. So
well, Mike, when you said it went viral, like, what are we talking? Like, how many people saw that article?
I mean, I think within a day, I think we had to like change our server, like whatever, we got overloaded. It was like 22,000 in one day or something like
Wow.
that visited our site, that visited that one article. And it's funny because that's not the type of article that's actually going to get our readership up either. Now, something like Austin Ivory's is like, oh, well, if Austin Ivory's going to publish his official response to the McCarrick report here, then maybe we should pay better attention to this website. But it's like, we published a piece once by a friend of mine who, speaking of fathers, speaking of Saint Joseph, he had been kind of estranged from his dad for years and years and years, and his dad, I think, had some mental issues and was very like introverted, just non-communicative, didn't show up at events. Like, I mean, just a sad story, Vietnam vet. And months before he died, I guess my friend's uncle got a phone call and said, your dad's in the hospital. He's got this serious illness, and he was able to get his brother and sister. His sister wound up sort of dragging him to the hospital, and then they wound up reuniting and sort of having this, beautiful reconciliation for the last month of his dad's life before his dad passed away. And I just, it's like I'm reading it and like, bawling like a, like a baby reading this thing. And I'm like, wow, this is, and then you post it online, and it did well. But it's like, I feel like that's the kind of piece that I would have loved for more people to read.
Yeah.
And instead it's, why were they brawling in a church in Seattle is what's driving the traffic.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I'm just learning as I go here with a Cuppa Joe, and it's interesting and on our Facebook group, it's interesting what people gravitate towards, and it's not usually what I think that everyone would or should be reading. But like you said, unfortunately, sensationalism sells. But one thing I love about your website and your whole apostolate is it's not just like one category. You hit so many different things in the whole spectrum of the Petrine ministry. Like one little thing you do, which I like a lot, you kind of gamify, if I can use that word,
Yeah.
which Pope said this. So you put like a quote, like you've got like a shadow of the Pope and question mark, and it's like, and you like, usually it's something like a very conservative type of quote. It's like, what, Pope Francis said that? Or then there's like a very kind of, wow, left-wing liberal quote that's, something like this, like, what? Pope St. Pius X said that? Really? So I think it's so cool. I mean, I think
Yeah.
people like.
And I got to give Pedro the credit for that. He's, and apparently he got it from, apparently there's a thing, my boys are into Pokemon. I don't know if, I'm sure yours are too, maybe.
Did you
but
say Pokemon?
Like Pokemon. And it's like, there's like a thing, like which Pokemon said this?
Yeah.
And apparently, I don't know, like I'm a little too old for Pokemon. Like it doesn't, none of it makes any sense to me at all. But apparently it's like he was inspired by that to do it with papal quotes. So
well, I was just trying to coin a new word and be corny and call it Pokemon. So
yeah. No,
maybe you can call it
that. That's good.
The Pope man. It's the Pope man. All right.
Gotta
So hey,
catch them all.
With that said, you got so much stuff on your website. You also have a new podcast. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this is so we started a podcast for Where Peter Is back in 2020, but then in the last year or so, I've gotten to know Jeannie Gaffigan, who is the wife of the comedian Jim Gaffigan. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. And it's in one of his stand-up shows, he goes, well, I'm Catholic, but my wife, she's a Shiite Catholic. And she's actually a best-selling writer in her own right. She wrote a book about brain tumor and the surgery and recovery that she had from that. But she's been her husband's like writing partner and co-producer for years and years and years. They have 5 kids, and sometime in the last year or two, she started to notice that a lot of she was completely oblivious to kind of just like you were. It's like, what, your friend comes up to you and says that the Pope is evil and doesn't believe in hell. And somehow she stumbled across my Twitter account and we started talking, and, and then we became friends and collaborated on a couple of things. And then I was in talks to start a podcast with one Catholic outlet, and she kind of signed on, and then we wound up talking to a couple of Catholic outlets, and we wound up at US Catholic. We started a podcast called Field Hospital, which Pope Francis always says the church, he sees the church as a field hospital tending to the wounds of the people, or the church is a field hospital tending to the wounds. And and so basically each episode we have a guest and have sort of a lively, in-depth conversation about a topic, whether it's immigration, whether it's the clerical sexual abuse crisis, whether it's race, whether it's the role of women in the church. We try to get an expert online on the show and try to probe a little bit deeper than maybe other people have listened to before. So yeah, it's going to be a 12 episode season. We've aired maybe 7 or 8 so far. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, a lot of work. It can be a lot of work, as you're learning with your podcast. It's it can be, doing your research ahead of time can sometimes be tough too. So
yeah, it's a great show. I was able to catch one that you did. Your guest was Father James Martin. And so I listened to that podcast, and it was refreshingly not what I thought it might be. Probably like maybe a lot who might be listening right now, I had, some bad thoughts and ideas on Father James Martin. I was like, oh, and actually when I saw the title, I was like, oh no, Mike Lewis is interviewing him. What? And,
well, when he was proposed as a guest, what do you think I was thinking?
so I listened, and he didn't say anything like I thought he might say from many of his detractors. And, this is something that kind of Pope Francis keeps teaching us. And more importantly, Jesus taught us, don't judge a book by its cover. Like, listen to what the person has to say, not what people say that the person said. So when I listened to your podcast, which was really good, by the way, Father James Martin said actually the opposite of what I expected him to say, which really resonated with me as a conservative Catholic. Like, I'm not just conservative, I'm like a former Baptist, black and white type of Catholic, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's right or wrong,
Yeah.
sin, saint or sinner, like that's kind of how I am. As I get older, I'm saying, yeah, there's some gray areas, and I have to admit to that. And we do have to walk with people. And there are certain friends that, maybe he just became Catholic, and, she already had a son, and there's a lot of imperfect stuff going on, but hey, God can fix us, messed up people with his grace, right? And the sacraments. And I'm thinking of one family, and they were able to, get married in the Catholic Church, had their wedding blessed, and now it's a beautiful family. One person could say early on, like, all this, but we have to look at all of ourselves. We're all sinners, right? And we're like all beggars telling each other where we found some bread, right?
Well, and I'm not going to say that, I would be comfortable saying everything that he says, or taking his approach in full. I think, though, what he's doing, and, I think I'm probably a little more comfortable with the way Pope Francis does it. But I think he made a good point, because I think the thing is, I think that we can all kind of accept that having same-sex attraction or being gay is it's something that, people can't, it's not something that people choose, those feelings, those impulses. And a lot of times Catholics who are raised in the church, who have those feelings, or have that, have that attraction, have that identity, they already feel condemned. They already feel like, God, why did you do this to me? Or maybe I'm less than perfect, or I'm disordered. And really, I think what he's trying to do is, that first step is get us to understand that God loves us and God welcomes us. And no matter what's in our past, God's love is unconditional. And that's something that I think is sorely needed in the church, throughout. Obviously, down the road, there's some issues about what you're doing and how are you going to continue, following this path that you're on. But I think, unless, it's like, you got a big family, you got 5, I got 4, the whole NFP. It's like, nobody's going to do that by accident. Nobody's going to make that decision just like, oops, okay, I'm just not gonna, it's really, you've got to make sort of this intentional countercultural choice. Well, why are you going to make that choice? It's because you have faith. It's because you desire to do what the faith asks of you, of what God asks of you. Which, if you don't even have a relationship with God, or if you think God hates you, or you just thrown up your hands at the church, telling someone to stop doing X, Y, and Z is not where you can start. You got to start from the person.
And that's not how Jesus did it. And like in that podcast you had, you guys talked about the woman at the well, and Jesus didn't come up and start saying, hey, lady, you're shacking up with this guy number 7. You shouldn't be doing that. You're excommunicated. Get out of here. He didn't say that. He just said, hey, how's it going? Got any water? And come and see. That's all we have to do. We shouldn't say, hey, what's your whatever? Are you Republican, Democrat? Are you straight, gay? We just say, hey, want to go to church with me? And just come and see, and then God would do the rest. Like, we don't. I think that's the whole point of like what Pope Francis does, which I love so much about him. He's not afraid to roll up his sleeves, get his hands dirty, and take all the flack, because if it means just finding one lost sheep, he's happy to take the flack from all the people who are perfect out there, all the Pharisaical Catholics are saying, oh, you shouldn't be talking to that lady at the well. No, you boys stay over there. I'm going to talk to the lady at the well, because I think she needs some love and she needs to know Jesus. So I like that. And he reminds me so much of that movie, In the Fisherman's Shoes.
In the Shoes of the Fisherman.
Yeah. In the Shoes of the Fisherman. where, like the first Pope, St. Peter, he's a bit impulsive. You never really know what he's going to do, if he's going to chop off somebody's ear today, what he's going to say on the papal plane, the shepherd one. But I love that about him, because he's very real, and, he's not so much with pomp and circumstance, and he's just kind of really like a pastor's Pope. He's a shepherd's Pope, where he wants to be out there with the sheep, getting the smell of the sheep on him, helping people. And, that's really, at the end of the day, like your field hospital title so eloquently says, that's really what it's about. And similar to what you said in that one quote is, I heard the rector of the cathedral in Wichita many years ago, he said, the church is not a museum for the saints, but a hospital for sinners. And I think all of us can resonate with that, because, a saint is just a sinner who keeps on trying. And we have to go to the hospital at least once a week to get that grace, right?
Yeah. And if people aren't even on the path, it's like, how do we get them on, welcome, people are, Pope Benedict said, people come to the church through attraction, not through, proselytism, or not through argumentation. I mean, apologetics is a good thing, but it has its place. It's all the, it's like someone's got to want to do what the church says in order for that kind of argumentation to work. If somebody has no desire, then you haven't even started. There's no point in arguing over that kind of question. So.
Exactly. Well, speaking of questions, Mike, I'm now at my second to last question. We're running out of time, so let me get to
Okay, I'll try to be quick.
Question. Well, you don't have to be quick, but I need to be quick and not talk so much. I need to be more like St. Joseph. So, and it's going to be impossible with this next question, because St. Joseph would say it much more succinctly. But anyway, the next question is this. If St. Joseph came down to the Vatican, let's say dressed as a carpenter, to do a job assignment, I don't know, like, fix the papal throne, the plumbing, whatever, as a little surprise apparition just for the Pope, what do you think St. Joseph, the father of the church, might advise his son, Pope Francis?
So, I'm thinking about looking at Pope Francis these days, sitting in his wheelchair. When I was in Rome, his limp looked real bad, and I know that he was pushing it. And I think one thing that, not that we know a ton about St. Joseph, but one of the things that I think we do know is that he accepted hardship. He didn't explain it away. He didn't ignore it. If he needed to get out of Bethlehem and get over to Egypt, he faced those challenges. And I think, I'm a little bit concerned about Pope Francis, because you hear these rumors that maybe he's not listening to his doctor's advice, or, he's reluctant to get the surgery. And I think there are some reasons for that, having to do with like anesthesia, but, to sort of accept where, not to push it too much. I think that's, just to recognize the situation and to do God's will within those parameters, and not to push beyond them.
Wow, that's beautiful, Mike. I think you're absolutely right. It's definitely not what I was thinking you would say.
What was I going to say?
I just thought you're going to be a bit more, what's the word? Kind of doctrinal or theological, but you were very real, and that was, how St. Joseph is. He's like, hey, focus on what we got to do to get the job done. And he himself, was sick later in his life and had to offer that up. And as you were speaking, I can just hear St. Joseph saying to his son, Pope Francis, slow down. You're getting old. You need to just start taking it easy and enter a new version of your ministry, which I haven't really thought about. And, I don't stay up on the Pope as much as you do, obviously. So he's in a wheelchair now, and he's limping. And how old is Pope Francis now?
He's 85 now.
He's 85. Okay, so with that
Yeah,
in
and I mean,
mind,
mentally he's still got it, and I guess that's kind of the thing. And it's really just the one stupid knee is probably what he's, what he's thinking. Um, and I don't
so
know. Selfishly, I'm thinking he should just go get the surgery, get back on his feet, get back at it. But no, I think it's to accept his limitations. Um,
so with that in mind, so Pope Francis is 85.
mhm.
He's got a limp. He sits in a wheelchair sometimes. There's two versions of Saint Joseph, either in his prime when he married Mary or around 80 or 90. Mother Angelica said, old men don't walk to Egypt. So I don't know. Do you think Pope Francis would be able to hop up and just walk to Egypt tomorrow? That's the long-winded way of saying, do you go more with a young Joseph or the old Joseph?
I'm gonna go. I'm a young Joseph guy. I just, when I think of like a marriage, and to see the Holy Family as a model of marriage. Not that age discrepancies aren't, don't happen, but I think just as a model for us. And since, like I've said, it's like one of those things where it's not doctrinal, it's their theories that are out there, their stories that are out there. I go with the young. I go with young Joseph, young Mary, struggling to get their lives together, struggling to figure out what to do. Um, you know, Losing their kid and in the temple. My family's trip to Europe, we experienced that a couple of times. We lost a couple of kids in the temple. So
Oh, so you can relate to Joseph's pain and suffering, like, where is my kid?
exactly.
Gotta be painful. I mean, I think that's since, Mary and Joseph, the greatest two saints in our church history, if they can lose their kid, it helps all Catholic couples feel a little bit better. It's like, hey, there's hope for me because I've done that too.
We lost our 15-year-old in the Uffizi. We lost our 5-year-old in the streets of Venice. So I mean, it was just one thing after another, and then somebody would break something, that belonged to somebody else every other day. So
Now, just real quick, it's not on our script here, and I'll get to the last question very quickly, but your 15-year-old, because that's very close, when Christ was 12. So how did that happen? Because sometimes people, some of these like modern smart Bible scholars say, oh, well, they didn't really lose Jesus for 3 days. That's impossible and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, that ain't impossible. We've got kids. And I think anyone who says that's impossible probably just doesn't have kids. Number two, they probably have never lived in a third world country like, my wife's from Mexico or Egypt. There are people, or like even Italy, like, manana, like take it easy. Like, yeah, we'll get there,
Yeah.
So with that said, speak to the time where you lost your 15-year-old.
Well, I mean, it was in the Uffizi Gallery, which is one of the biggest art galleries in the world. And even though it gets praise for it is one of the drier ones. I think that, you look compared to like the Louvre or the Vatican Museum. I mean, all of them have their high points and their low points, but I would say that the Uffizi is one of the more, I mean, not that it's not priceless and great, and I think he sat down in one room because I think we were stuck in a room behind him, and then we got past him, but then he was on his own and wound up on a different floor. And I wasn't even in the Uffizi when he was found, because I took our 5-year-old out because she was melting down. And my wife hears on the loudspeaker 2 hours after he disappeared, Miss Lewis, please come to the reception desk. And there he was. And really, it was a big, busy place with, I don't think he intended to get lost, but after a while, that there was our kids didn't have, cell phones, just the parents. So he wound up not connecting with us. So that's can happen to anyone. Could have happened to me, I think, but
Indeed. Well, cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. All right, so our last question, Mike, and this, springs off of the last question quite well, since Pope Francis is 85. I think we all need to pray for him. I think we're too easy in our day and age to criticize. And I think that for every time that we hear a criticism, or we ourselves, hopefully not, criticize Pope Francis, we need to offer up at least 3 times the amount of prayer. So like for every criticism, offer up 3 prayers. I think we don't pray enough for our Pope, our priests. I mean, we can make it real. Like, you go to mass, and a lot of times after mass, like, what do you think about the homily? The music or whatever. Like, I think it's in our fallen nature to complain. At least me. It's one thing I'm trying to get past. And we need to build up, not beat up. And an easy way to do that is just pray for a priest, because I mean, I can't imagine. You got a brother who's a priest. I can't imagine, but it's probably not very easy,
Yeah. Well, it's my job to sort of keep them in line. That's
yeah. I mean, we lovingly, right? Like,
oh yeah. No, I'm kidding. I mean,
we need.
But he doesn't get treated like a regular person by a lot of people, and so it's you need your big brother to sort of keep you in check.
So with that in mind, since Pope Francis is getting older, who do you think will be the next Pope? And will he have a beard like St. Joseph? And beard or beardless, will WI support him?
Well, assuming it's going to happen, let's say it happens 10 years from now and he decides to retire to Argentina or something like that.
At 95 years old, okay.
Yeah, just, let's be
optimistic.
I'm not going to be terribly creative, because there's no way of knowing these things. But so I'll go with just Cardinal Tagle from the Philippines originally. Young, he speaks perfect English, which would, to me, that would be really cool to hear the Pope speaking in your own language fluently. Would be, which is something we really, Benedict's was pretty good. John Paul's was iffy. Francis's is horrible. But he's youthful, he's inspiring, he's got a great singing voice. I don't know, he's got a YouTube channel if you've ever seen him sing karaoke. He would not have a beard. I don't believe he has the genetics for it. And yes, we would absolutely support him. There will be a lot of growing pains. I think I've never followed a Pope this closely, because I wasn't doing what I'm doing now before. Now it's like almost everything the Pope does, I at least hear about or read about. So I'm sure that when he does things in a different style, I will probably be, shaken up, whoever the next Pope is. But I'll continue to pray for the patience and the understanding and the ability to recognize that the new Pope, whoever he is, would have his own gifts and that we would support him the best that we can. So
just to be clear, I think I heard, did you say Bishop Luis Antonio Tagle?
Tagle. Yes.
Okay. So that's the guy.
Tagle.
Yeah, I like him too. He's I don't know a lot about him, but being in Hong Kong, we're quite close to the Philippines, and there's many Filipinos in Hong Kong, and we have many Filipino friends. So he comes up in the news from time to time, and I like him. Every time I see him, he's always smiling. He's always positive. And there's one article where I read, which kind of resonated with me, where he was telling all his priests and his diocese there in Philippines, when you start the mass, don't say good morning. Just start like this, name the Father, go right to it, because we say the peace of Christ be with you. So why you need to say good morning? Hey, how's it going? Because that's one little pet peeve of mine, in the mass, when the priest says, hey, what's up? Good morning. How's it going? Oh, rock on, Padre. What are we supposed to say, right? So as crazy as it might be as a former Baptist in me, you would expect me to be like, yeah, that's cool. But I was like, come on, let's just do what the church wants us to do. And you got this beautiful, better than good morning expression, the peace of Christ be with you. Like, what better thing could you say than like, hey, outside, so based on that one small little thing that, he said to his priest, I think I would really like him also as a Pope, even though he might not have a beard. That's okay, because I believe beard.
Well, this is like 6 days growth. Okay. So I can relate to Cardinal Tagle.
Well,
I don't know. Speaking of things we get from our fathers, This is something. No
Yes.
inability to grow a decent beard or mustache.
Well, I stuck the word in there, beard, because I believe, and this is more than just, tongue in cheek, I believe that beards build bridges. Because if the next Pope has a beard, have you ever seen, I'm sure you've seen the Pope chart, right? Like one church we used to go to in Wichita, St. Francis Church, they had this beautiful Pope chart. Like you could see from St. Peter all the way up to, at that time, John.
Oh, yeah.
And I noticed that they all had beards for like, first 1,000 years. And then they went from beards to like goatees. And like one guy had a mustache, and then they had no facial hair at all for like the last many popes. So I'm thinking, well, why is that? But then also I thought, if the next Pope has a beard, who will relate to him better? The Orthodox, maybe the Pope.
Oh, there you go.
Bring the
Good point,
Orthodox
good
back,
point.
and then the Muslims. So I think that, hey, since the Pope quite well, you always get him those high fives, right? So send him a memo. It's like, hey, Pope, grow a beard. He's from Argentina. He could probably do that. So if he grew a beard, maybe he could bring the Orthodox back and the Muslims. I don't know. Is it a crazy thought?
But I mean, Cardinal O'Malley was in the running, and he's the Capuchin Franciscan with the beard, but he's like 78 or 79 now, so that's probably unlikely. But I'll have to look at the bearded cardinals, or the ones who probably could, grow a decent beard, and maybe we can start a campaign. Try not to get excommunicated in the process, because apparently we're not supposed to, buy papal elections, but find the best bearded cardinal and work from there. I think that's a good, or archbishops who haven't been made cardinals yet, who have good beards. We could lobby for that.
Well, it's not Movember yet, but it's just this funny thought I had. And, sometimes you can get off onto some odd tangents. And, I got off onto the beard tangent one November. And there's even a book, I can't remember who wrote it, but it was something like The Beard and Christianity or something. There's like a whole Facebook group about how, men should have beards and all this. And I thought, well, admittedly, it would do well with, Orthodox and Muslims.
But I always feel left out of those conversations. So.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's and I only have this because I was in quarantine for like 21 days, and I shaved off.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then I kept this part. So this part will probably go soon too, because in my industry normally we don't have any facial hair, something to do with the oxygen mask. So, well, Mike, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And again, tell us your website one more time, so in case anyone's just joining.
Wherepeteris.com. Wherepeteris.com.
So I encourage you to keep up the good work. And, where Peter is, there also is St. Joseph. And I like to remind all of our friends, as I always do, go to Joseph. Peace. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. And don't worry, Sunday is looking pretty good. So when you wake up tomorrow and it's your Sunday, I'm looking outside, the sun is shining, and it's a beautiful day. So welcome to the future tomorrow.
All right.
Take care, brother.
Take care.